Hi, and welcome back to This Week in Voice, Season 6, Episode 10. So we just had a special episode last week with Harry Mack. It's been making some rounds that our show usually doesn't make. We've been gratified for that. Check it out if you haven't already. But we're thrilled today to get back to the normal show and have two really good executives from the space, and we're thrilled to talk to them. And Phil, I'm going to start with you. If you don't mind, tell us who you are and tell us who you're with.
Sure. My name's Phil Hall. I'm with a company called LXT. We are a relatively new player in this space, but we're very focused on AI data in particular. And we support top 10 technology clients and a whole lot of other clients as well. So my background is that I was with a company called Appen for 17 years in the similar space. I joined the company as a subject matter expert. I was teaching linguistics before I started working in the speech data space in particular. And so my interest in this space is definitely oriented towards speech and language, and that fits in with my background. But my role at LXT is in sales and marketing, and that's pretty exciting. Working with the best players in this space.
We're excited to have you be part of the show. Yeah, and LXT, you got a cool business. Thanks for making the time.
That's great. Thanks, Bradley.
You got it. Lauren, same thing for you. Take a moment, introduce yourself, and tell us about Veritone.
Sure, thanks. Thanks so much for having me too. I'm excited about this conversation with yourself and Phil. A bit about Veritone. We're actually an enterprise AI solutions and software provider. So we have built the first, we like to call operating system for AI. We call that AIware. What it does is it makes engines like, Phil, you mentioned kind of the top technology leaders in the space like Amazon, Google, Microsoft, all of these amazing point solutions providers available to our customers through the AIware platform. So we have over 300 engines in addition to those key players that provide, a solution for like a very specific use case. But, what we find is that most customers have a problem, they come to us and they need a combination of engines to solve their problem. So versus having to go to all of these point solutions providers directly, like you have to engage with Microsoft, then you have to engage with Amazon, then you're going to Google for some sort of tie-off piece. We can be that gap and that stopgap for all of those engines so that you can come to Veritone, you can say, I have this data, I need it to be transformed in this manner. Through AIware, we can build you a specific custom cognitive workflow that then kicks off. All right, great, you have audio, let's transcribe that. Let's translate that, and then let's regenerate that audio in new languages for you. So it's a really powerful system. We're really excited about all the engine providers we have participating in that system, but we're just trying to make kind of cognitive workflows easier for customers to leverage and build through our capabilities so that you don't have to go to a point solution. We can figure out how all of those engines work together for you and build you a custom workflow. So on that piece of it, I'm our Senior Director of Project Management for Veritone Voice, which is our newest engine that we just built and released in May of 2021. That one is really exciting because it's a synthetic voice engine in the fact that it can take audio, it can take speech, it can transform your audio into new languages, it can transform your text into audio. I'll be speaking primarily about the Veritone voice engine, but it is just a series of engines in the AIware suite. So more on the technology provider side, very interested in the data side, because that's what we use, to Phil's point, to kind of guide all of these recommendations on workflows and solutions and what engines are needed at what point. But really excited to kind of dive into these voice use cases and applications and, what you're doing on the podcast side with Voice Bradley.
Thanks for being part of the show. Yeah, and thrilled to have both of y'all, both companies in the house for Project Voice 2022, which will be coming up late April. The show is filling up. We're going to include the link in the notes, and we've got an announcement tonight with that'll be emailed out Monday with another lineup announcement. There'll probably be some more to come. It's going to be a good event, but glad to have both of y'all be part of that. Glad to have both of y'all here now. Appreciate the intros. With that, let's get to the news. And story number one, and I'm going to read this. I had to close the link because it wouldn't stop auto playing a video on my browser. You got to love that. Voice cloning technology may have been used in Pearland scam. This is from KHOU in Houston. And I will attempt to open this article and hope it won't start auto playing this thing again. Because I want to read this subhead. The scam goes beyond a call that claims they're holding a loved one for ransom. It may use voice cloning technology to mimic a loved one's voice asking for help. I've seen some stuff like this. This is just sort of an interesting, more recent example. And Lauren, I'm going to start with you, and then Phil, I'll go to you on this. This is alarming. This is kind of the dark side in many ways of the technology that all of us spend time working on. Share with me and the audience, just your reaction, your thoughts as you look at what's going on here.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, it's really a shame that this technology can be used in kind of these like nefarious and malicious kinds of use cases, because at Veritone, we are taking the stance that, synthetic voice technology improves accessibility and, allows content to be created in new languages. And we're kind of positioning it as a way to open up the conversation in the space instead of, making people so afraid of it, like these kind of scammers are doing. And there's really, the interesting part is everything is so new. With synthetic voice and with deep fakes and with all the technology coming out, that there's really no legislation in place yet from, higher governances like the FCC on, where this can be used and what are the guidelines and what are the protocols in place. And so obviously these scammers are getting ahead of all of those kind of crackdowns and things like that. I would say from a synthetic voice provider standpoint, where we're trying to make a point of difference is that we won't create a voice without the express consent of that voice owner. So, you come to us, you say, hey, I want a synthetic voice for my show. I think it would be great to release my show in a new language. We could create your voice, Bradley, in Spanish. You could really release your show in Spanish, moving forward. But we would never create your synthetic voice without you being aware of that technology. You have to provide a written consent agreement that states you're aware of this. You have to also provide training data files to us to build your synthetic voice with, along with a vocal authorization clip that we can match back to. This is Bradley actually authorizing us to build this technology. This is the training data we provided. We use your authorization as kind of like a fingerprint to make sure the training data provided actually matches the authorization statement you've given. And only then will we move forward with creating that voice. So we get a lot of questions, when we're dealing with customers like, oh, can you do George Clooney? That would be so awesome. And the scary part is the technology is out there, yes, to do George Clooney. I think on the technology provider side, it's really up to them to enforce like who is asking for this voice. Do they have permission from this voice owner to create the voice? What is the use case for the voice? Where will the voice live and be deployed? And so, at Veritone, we're really trying to be the gold standard of voice creation and, with that consent process baked in every project we take on. It's really important that the technology providers aren't just out there accepting projects or work without knowing kind of the intent behind it. Um, and then on the consumer side, so, technology providers need to be very specific about the projects they take on, and, they should be liable if a voice gets created without the consent of that person knowing about it. Additionally, on the consumer side, I think we also need to be super mindful about where we're putting our voice, because, there's TikToks, there's social media, there's clips, I'm creating and putting out there that can be scraped down and used nefariously that maybe I'm not always mindful of. But I think it goes to show the power of a voice becoming part of our identity. Like voice is so important now that it's on the same kind of level of like your social security number. Like if someone had my voice, that's almost more powerful than having my social security number, because of everything you could author with voice. So I think that story, super scary, super real. Technology providers need to like really firm up, whose hands we're putting this technology in. And then on the consumer side, we need to be more mindful of how we're releasing kind of our own voice footage, I think.
No, complete agreement. And Phil, I want to ask you the same question. So, your response to just simply gazing upon what's happening here with this story.
Yeah, look, it frightening is the right word. I'll give an example of how uncontrolled this has been. So 3 or 4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago, I was on an expert panel at the InterSpeech conference. And one of the other guests was Kate Mill from ex-Toshiba and currently with Cambridge University. And she told a story about in the 90s, participating in a speech data collection where she signed permission because people were working on, it was early days of recognition. And it was a small data collection, a few hundred people. She contributed to that and signed this permission slip that said, yeah, I give permission for this to be used for voice technology. Move forward 20 years and somebody comes to her and says, hey, this is really cool. Look, I've created a synthesizer of your voice from that data that you donated in 1995. And she at that time had never imagined that the speech technology that she was going to be contributing to would be advanced to the stage where small footprint, tiny footprint speech synthesis would be that accurate and that possible. And so it really highlighted that often permission that you're giving permission ahead of advances in technology. And so that creates issues for the longevity of data and for the idea that you even have informed consent at the time that you give permission. So yeah, that aspect of it is pretty frightening. This is likely to be that small footprint synthesis, and it's likely to be flawed to some extent. It's not going to be a super cool synthesis, but enough to scam with. But I am certainly very concerned by the deep fake possibilities where people have deeper pockets, greater access to very, very large volumes of data. So if you want to do a deep fake of a national leader, a president or something like that, the volume of data that you can get access to through news channels is virtually unlimited. And so the quality of that can be that much higher. And yeah, and I as Lauren said up front, it's a shame that this should taint the technology when we actually have terrific benefits coming from the technology. And I'm not really sure how we address that. I mean, clearly Veritone is taking this seriously and has looked at ways to build in as much protection as possible. But it is quite a frightening development, and I'm sure that it will have some negative impact on uptake of technology and of beneficial participation in the technology. So I know there are other stories that we're looking at today which will tie into this, where people have to make a choice and a trade-off between how well the technology is going to work for them and how much they want to trust the developers of the technology.
There was another story that I had read, not for this show, but and I don't even remember, it was like a week or two ago, and there's a word for this, but I don't remember what the word is. Basically, there's a certain type of scam going on where somebody will call your house or your cell phone, and they'll say that your child is kidnapped, and they'll demand ransom, and they'll do this specifically during the school day. So your child is at school, and so the child is not with you. And, unless, nobody's verifying where their child is all the time at school. So who's to say where they are? They'll make 100, 200 calls, and they'll, knowing that most people will call them out and not believe them or not pay or whatever. But, if they make 100 calls, they'll get that one person to pay 5 to 10 grand or whatever the ransom is. And that's a whole scam. And sometimes they'll use synthetic voice with that, and sometimes they don't. But yeah, I think y'all's comments on this are really good. And I don't know, regulation, you hate to admit that probably has to be part of the equation, but it probably does. But the other part of the equation is just the technology providers like y'all and many other companies working on this, at minimum being cognizant of how some of the more nefarious ways the technology is being used, and being current on those. Any closing thoughts on this?
Yeah, I know it's truly sad, because this does kind of put a cloud on the technology advancements, like Phil said. I think this is just another one of those kind of phishing scams, that consumers will slowly start to catch on to and be kind of more cognizant of, like all of the email phishing scams that, kind of we're used to seeing now, where we're smart, we're inspecting an email. Where did this come from? Do I know the sender? What is it asking me? So unfortunately, that's kind of like a learned behavior we need to have as a mindset for consumers. And then on the technology side, yeah, we're trying to enforce a bunch of deep fake detection software as well on the other side of it. So everything that's created through our system does get stamped with an inaudible watermark. So that if you were a voice talent, you came to me and you said, hey, I don't remember creating this clip, where did it come from? We could actually look at the clip itself, detect that inaudible watermark, and tell you exactly the user who created the clip, the timestamp of the clip, what project it was part of. So, as a technology provider, we are trying to put as much kind of traceability into these technologies as we can, so that, we do have a little bit of protection in place for the talent who is willing to give this a shot.
Yeah, I think that's great to hear that there are technologies being developed and that people are trying to stay ahead of the curve on the scams. And I'd certainly agree with Lauren that every time there's an emerging scam type, there becomes a community awareness of that. So the early adopters, if you like, for the scam, they may get away with things, but people very quickly become aware of the nature of the scams, and they there's the human scam detection metrics are quite powerful. So yeah, hopefully this isn't going to be something that gets in the way of the progress of the technology, because clearly the benefits outweigh the negatives.
Oh, I'm sure it will, but hopefully hopefully, I guess there's just got to be something that tells you, hey, this maybe it's on your phone or your handset, or saying, hey, we don't think this is legit, somehow, I don't know.
Yeah, that'd be
But interesting place to start. I'm going to move on to story number 2 here, and this is from Fortune. Amazon's Alexa is becoming a member of the family. So this is kind of that's a nice PR piece here about Alexa, and it sort of discusses the relationship that people had with Alexa really leading into the pandemic, during the pandemic, and not a lot of surprising information in this article for people familiar with the show or thinking about the space. But what I really want to do with this, and Lauren, I'll start with Phil, and I'll go to you second on this. Phil, I want to use this article as sort of a Alexa heat check. We got 2 really interesting independent companies as guests on the show. When you hear Alexa, when you think about Alexa, when you see an article like this, what is the state of the Alexa ecosystem in your mind here in 2022?
Well, the state of the Alexa ecosystem, I think, well, they're clearly market leaders. They're very, very strong in this space. And I think Rohit's proposal to really push that personalization to the next level is right on target. It's the personalization is the way to make the tools more powerful. And I know Rohit personally. We worked on some fairly big US government projects before he moved to Amazon, and in Jeff Bezos's one of Jeff Bezos's recent books, he does name check Appen, the company that I worked for, and our role in actually getting Alexa off the ground. So we did a massive amount of work on making it possible, so going into homes and doing that kind of work. I think that Rohit's had a very strong vision for this from the word go, but I do think it's worth considering how this sits in the context of the previous article, where personalization depends on, it's a trade-off. So to get that really high degree of personalization, you also have to relinquish a certain amount of control and put more of yourself into the system. And I do wonder whether that's going to, whether concerns around security are going to continue to be a pressure that limits the scale to which Alexa and other ecosystems of this type can reach their full potential.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the question is, what direction. It's hard to tell what direction, they cover so much surface area. Some parts of the organization are moving one way, other parts of the organization are moving another, and it's sort of hard sometimes to sort of net it out. And so that's why on this show, on occasion, I'll ask, for articles like this to be an opportunity to just sort of say what somebody thinks when they look at Alexa. And Lauren, I'm going to ask you the same exact question. When you look at this article, when you, through your Veritone eyes, look at the Alexa ecosystem, what do you see?
Yeah, well, really exciting topic. I think that how this is different from the previous conversation is we're kind of switching gears from purely voice to now talking about a brain. So, Alexa really started with kind of these transactional requests, like fetch me this, get me that, tell me this, where I think people are more comfortable now with Alexa being in their homes, and they kind of want more of this kind of conversational AI to happen. Instead of, everybody's frustrated, you ask Alexa a question, she gives you an answer, you ask a follow-up question, and the conversation stops there. I think consumers are ready for that conversation to continue. And they do want, like multi-level conversations to happen with Alexa. I think, you know, in the article as well, that was reflected with the Alexa developers and the product managers saying, you know, the infrastructure is here, the time is now, we're ready to go. We just need more help building that conversational AI brain of Alexa, because they're tapping into public domains for, you know, basic knowledge like geography and history and things like that. So Alexa's pretty smart at factual information, but they need help from brands that have relationships with consumers to teach them how consumers want to engage with the brand via a smart speaker skill. You know, I think brands are also realizing now that smart speaker skills aren't really like trinkets anymore. It's actually a way to consistently like engage with your audience and your consumers, and also, you know, across all of the channels they interact with your brand on, like a website or social, you should have a presence on the Alexa marketplace as well. And I think from the Amazon developers perspective, that's what they're saying too, is that we've made this marketplace, we've made this technology available. Bring us your insights so that we can build a skill that can have a conversation with your audience. You know, we're using voice now kind of as that remote that we would typically have gone to Google, typed in a website, gone to the brand's website, read what we wanted to do, we chose how we wanted to engage with the brand. But I think now we want to use our voices to kind of control those relationships that we're having, and we're able to do that through the Alexa marketplace. I think brands kind of need to realize that they need to have a footprint in this marketplace, and they need to provide kind of that context and that brain power and that, you know, domain of knowledge to Alexa, so that the Amazon developers can kind of focus on building that kind of conversational AI aspect. And it's a lot of work, like, you know, but the opportunity to kind of have your brand affinity and have, you know, build that relationship with the brand via a smart speaker skill is like so important and so massive. But you have to, you know, think of who the persona is on that application, what their user journeys are going to be on that application. What challenges or pain points does your audience have that a voice skill or an assistant could help solve? Like, what are the internal and external kind of landscape research on people engaging with your brand? Like, what hypothesis do you have that we could test through smart speaker and then, you know, iterate on? So I think from the technology perspective, they've built an amazing platform, and it is ready to take, you know, conversational AI to the next level, but it does need the help of, you know, the brand and the folks that bring the relationship with the consumers to make the technology more smart, so that, you know, it's thinking about user behavior and user journeys and then routing conversations appropriately.
No, that's great. And it's interesting to hear both of y'all just sort of talk about the ecosystem. And like I said, it's a good opportunity to heat check the Alexa ecosystem. And what I'm hearing from both of y'all is, hey, still strong, still the 1,000-pound gorilla. All right, no, that's good.
Absolutely.
Perfect. We will move on to story number 3, and this is an interesting one. It's from payments.com. Restaurants leverage conversational AI to automate order taking. So this is, to me, a sign of where we're going, where already we were seeing, prior to the pandemic, voice and AI sort of filtering its way into different industries, some at a gradual pace, others at a little bit more accelerated pace, but still sort of meandering on in, you know. And then the pandemic hits, and now there's industries that just, the urgency is cranked way up. And we're seeing real purposeful movement quickly. And, Lauren, I'll start with you on this and Phil, go to you second. With restaurants, already there was some movement this direction prior to the pandemic. There was experimentation, there was acquisition here or there was some stuff going on. And now that we've been through this global crisis together, and now we can't get labor to show up on time. We had trouble filling open job recs up and down every organization, much less hospitality and restaurant type of businesses. Now the door is blown wide open, which leads us to this article. I want to get your thoughts. What do you think when you took a look at this?
Yeah, awesome. I totally agree with you. I think, we've seen kind of this innovation change and behavior change and mindset change with the pandemic, and a lot of systems and services going remote. So, people are more comfortable like buying groceries online, and that initial hesitancy we really worked through over these past couple years. So retail, I think, is like the perfect place for voice AI, because these experiences are like typically funnels that people get stuck in. So if there's like a prompt like guiding you along the way, I think people will have a much better experience with what they're trying to get from the retail provider as well. Like if you think of like, beyond just, food ordering, like what about insurance onboarding, or, buying something from a store? Like all of these kind of experiences can be more guided. And then I think on the workforce piece, I also don't think it takes away jobs from restaurant workers, but it actually creates more jobs for them, because now there's a layer of humans that kind of have to review these text to voice orders and work with the staff to get them prepped and, made and delivered. And so technology is really taking kind of the mundane piece out of the human's job, so that human can be more valuable, so that when you do place an order through text to voice and you pull up and you're at the drive-through window or you arrive in person, there is still that human there that's providing exceptional customer service to you. So, end to end, the funnel is easier for you to interact with. There's prompts that guide you to complete whatever you need to complete. When the time is right for you to show up and pick up your order, there's still a human there kind of tying the knot on a great customer service experience. But there's also new jobs being created between all of those kind of touch points happening to QC technology, build the technology. And so I think it's not replacing jobs, it's actually creating more of them, and it's making the human at the end of the loop more valuable when they do have kind of that face-to-face interaction. So even, I think we're humanizing the business, even if humans aren't like front and center, we're still creating experiences that are more engaging and more efficient. And then, we have the cherry on the top human at the end that, thanks you, gives you your orders, there with a smile type of a life cycle.
That's an interesting point of view. I think I mostly agree with that. That's interesting. I appreciate that. And Phil, I want to ask you the same question. Conversational AI is impacting everything, especially and including restaurants. What do you think when you saw the piece?
Yeah, well, my initial reaction was probably one of, who would have thought that the problem would be that we couldn't fill the roles? Who would have thought that was going to become the problem? Because I certainly, the story that Lauren's telling about, the increased humanization, the shifting of humans into more meaningful work and away from less mundane tasks, that's a story that is not unfamiliar. We've heard this over the last few years. If I'm honest, I've always been a bit skeptical of that story, but here it is coming to life, and it turns out that it's not so far off the mark. I mean, it's right now, you can't find enough labor to do the jobs, and there are great opportunities to leverage the technology. And I'm reading this article. The other part of my reaction was, okay, there are two pieces of great news in there. So one piece of news is that the technology is at a place where commercial organizations that are well and truly outside of the domain that we're all working in have a high enough level of confidence to put their trust in the technologies that we're all developing. So that's a very encouraging sign that that there is acceptance on the part of the commercial entities that we engage with. And then the second reaction is that those companies would only have that confidence if they also felt that the consumers, the end consumers, were equally confident about the technology. And so they're doing a rollout in 50 outlets. That's not an insubstantial rollout. That tells me that they've probably done quite a lot of background proof of concept work. They've confirmed that they don't have problems with near homophones and things like that, and that this will actually work for the application and the menu that they're dealing with. And that they've got enough confidence to roll it out into 50 stores. And from there, you'd expect that this is something that's going to end up in, I can't remember the numbers, was 2,000 stores that they had, something like that. So I read this and I was filled with joy. This suggests to me that the work we've been doing over the last 20, 25 years is really maturing, coming to market in a big way that you could still have been skeptical about 10 years ago. So yeah, I thought it was very, very interesting.
Well, that's great, and it's interesting just to hear y'all's different takes on it. And Lauren, I think that the idea of technology freeing people to better uses for themselves is you hope that's the case, because ultimately it's going to happen anyway. The elevator operators might have been upset at not being elevator operators anymore, but ultimately they went on and found other things to do. And I think here that just this idea that we knew this was coming. I mean, the people who worked in the space knew this was coming, where the technology at some point in time would get good enough to supplant jobs. Well, as it turned out, it came about at approximately the same time where people said, you know what you can do with that job? I'm out of here. So interesting how the world works. And Phil, I agree with your point as well, just about how in many ways this is gratification for everybody working on this stuff. That these businesses where the entire sum total of the business is taking an order from one human being to another, and then fulfilling it, verbally. The person drives up, they say some stuff, they pull around, and then they get something handed to them, and you hope it's the right thing. If this works here, then it probably ought to work anywhere. So you feel pretty good about that. That's great comments. Yeah, great all the way around. I'm going to go on to our final story here, which is kind of an interesting one. This is from the New York Post. And it's also from a couple of months ago. Usually we keep all the stories current, but this one, I guess I just missed this or didn't see it or whatever. It felt like including it. Your iPhone has 10 Harry Potter spells that really work with Siri. And so I have an Android phone. So I don't have an iPhone at the moment. I'm thinking about switching back. Don't tell Apple. But you got my wife's iPhone. I said, hey, I got to try something. And she's like, saw me trying out one of these Harry Potter spells and thought I lost my mind more than usual, but they work.
It works.
I tried the one to turn on the lights and turn on, and it turned on the flashlight. I was like, wow, okay. So I think there's something cool about that. A good story to end with. And Phil, I'll start with you, and then Lauren, go to you. It feels like this story to me feels a little bit bigger than it is. Like the idea of having hidden language, hidden functionality, secret features, extra stuff lurking underneath the surface at the subdermal layer of voice assistants and conversational AI. There's something magnetizing about that. There's something cool about it. Do you agree, or think I'm just crazy?
Well, yeah, I agree with you to some extent. Yeah, I think it's pretty exciting. I love the idea. I'm not sure if it's already in place, but I'd imagine that the hardcore Trekkies out there are going to want to be able to speak to their phone and get the same kind of functionality in Klingon, and they're going to feel like they're an underserved community unless they get that. So I think, yeah, I think people are going to really quite enjoy those cool features. And given that speech is something that you do publicly, you know, there's a demonstrative bit of showbiz about that. You know, like people will quite enjoy speaking to their phone in another language, or speaking to their phone in, you know, using Harry Potter spells. There's something very, very, very cool about that. But I also, you know, I wonder, and I don't want to place you guys in my age bracket, but I wonder if there's something about yeah, my age bracket that makes me susceptible to thinking, oh wow, isn't this cool, isn't this exciting? Because I didn't test drive this on my phone, but I asked Jody, our head of marketing, to put it in front of her teenage daughter. And if you want to find the unfiltered truth on something, you know, teenage is a great place to go. So she asked her teenage daughter to test drive these spells, which she did. And her daughter's reaction was, wow, that is so like slow. There was, it wasn't, her reaction wasn't, that's so cool. She just noticed that the technology wasn't really as fast as she would like it to be. So, you put it in front of a teenager, they take it for granted that that's going to work. Why wouldn't Harry Potter spells work? But they just like, that's really cool. The technology is not quite up to scratch though. So,
well, it's a shame that you can't wave a Harry Potter wand and fix the last 7 years of Apple negligence to the Siri platform, but they haven't come up with a spell for that just yet.
well, I'm not going to say that out loud, but yeah.
You let me say it. That's perfectly fine in my usual role. But Lauren, I want to ask you the same thing. Coolness. You think this is cool, or you think this is sort of whatever, or what are your thoughts when you saw this?
Sure. I am a little bit biased because as a kid, I was the one who had to be at Barnes and Noble at midnight when the new book came out to have it and read it in a day. So I am probably this target audience. So for me, I think it was smart of them to kind of tap into this like nostalgicness that this entire generation feels for, this particular world. To your point about, is this something bigger? I think yes. I think leveraging these types of like hardcore communities, like, to your point, Phil, like the Trekkies or like, Harry Potter fans or whatever it is kind of a bigger picture, like this building of worlds, this kind of idea I think we're seeing a lot of now, especially, in bringing some sort of like tech feature to like a real, like techies are real, they're a real group of people leveraging technology to kind of bring them into like your system, or be an iPhone person, or, be an Android person is really smart. I think we're going to see more of this connection to tech and particular worlds a lot in the future with the metaverse, just in the fact, like, Disney's building their own metaverse, and what it means to like have a metaverse is really like having a world that people can come to and interact with and find these cool little Easter eggs, like you mentioned, like the Siri Lumos spell. Like that's just one tiny Easter egg that draws me into kind of a bigger world that they might be building for, metaverses and things in the future. So I think it's smart for them to tap into kind of you know, Harry Potter that has such like a brand affinity. They could do that with any brand that has like a really strong audience tie-in connection. But I think it is like a preview of what's to come in the metaverse space where, you know, it's like, cool, you like that spell, come engage with Harry Potter via this Apple world that we're building where, you know, I can actually transport myself there using, you know, my avatar. I can create my synthetic voice so that if I'm speaking to you in this hypothetical world, you're actually hearing me, you're seeing me, I'm there, even though not physically. I think it is bigger than just these cool Easter eggs that we found in the app. I think it's a sign of worlds to come, and you know, technology providers tapping into kind of this brand affinity to, you know, entice people to come there.
I think that's right on. I think the tie back to the metaverse is right on the money, you know, and you could see this playing out in those ecosystems really well because, you know, the introduction of this particular vernacular and you know, jargon related to a specific universe or set of characters or whatever, it makes you feel a sense of belonging. And it makes you feel like you know, the construction of this entire experience was purposeful, you know, and intentional. And when so many things with Siri have not been purposeful and not been intentional, you know, seeing this story, I have to admit, like I feel I mean, this story with this particular, you know, fairly insignificant addition is probably worth 10 new new features to Siri done by a legion of product team people. You know, they get a lot of bang for the buck with this sort of thing, and that's what I think is kind of interesting about it. It just you know, it's something a little bit deeper, and I think y'all hit on it, both of you, with your comments, so I appreciate that. Look, this is great. Thanks to both of you for being part of This Week in Voice. As always, appreciate you taking the time to share your experience and expertise with not just me, but the audience as well.
Thanks, Bradley. It was great to take part and great to meet you both.
Likewise, thank you so much for having me. I'm jealous of your art collection that you have behind you, Phil. It's been lovely to look at.
Thanks to both of you. So for This Week in Voice, Season 6, Episode 10, thank you for listening, watching if you're watching on YouTube. Until next time.